Hello and welcome to today's webinar, A New Era, Transform Your Oracle Databases Across Private and Hybrid Clouds. This special webinar event is brought to you in partnership with Nutanix and produced by Actual Tech Media. Thanks so much for joining us on the webinar today. We've got a great event lined up for you. We're going to have a live demo, so make sure that you stay tuned for that as well. Before we jump into today's topic and I introduce you to our expert presenter, I want to first just talk for a few moments about the flow of the event and a few things that you need to know about the console. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as your moderator. As always, here at Actual Tech Media, we want these events to be educational. We're all former IT professionals ourselves here at Actual Tech Media, and we know how tough it can be to solve your enterprise IT challenges. So we are here to help. We'll be doing a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the event, and we encourage your questions. You can ask your questions there in the questions tab of your audience console, and we'll also be doing a best question prize, which I'll talk about here in just a moment. Before we do that, I want to call your attention to the handouts that are there in your audience console. Most importantly, there's a link right at the top to test drive the Nutanix Era solution. This is a free test drive you can do in your web browser, and we'll be talking about it more in the webinar. But I want you to remember that link because that is going to be your gateway to try out this solution for yourself. There's also a link there to the RBL Bank case study, where you can learn about how a customer out there has adopted the Nutanix Era solution and just the tremendous difference that it's done in driving their digital transformation. So make sure that you check out that case study. There is also a link to the total economic impact of Nutanix Era by Forrester Consulting, which talks about how Nutanix Era netted a 3-year 291% ROI and a sub 6-month payback period. So make sure that you check out that resource. And then finally, there's the ESG benchmark study of Nutanix Era. So lots of great resources there in the handouts tab. And then at the end of the webinar, I'll be announcing the winner of our Visa $300 gift card door prize. Of course, if you're watching this on demand, the drawing has already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found there in the handouts tab. And then finally, I mentioned our best question prize. This is something new we've recently started. We're doing an additional gift card for a $50 Visa gift card for the best question, which we'll select after the event. And we did this to just help encourage questions on these webinars. I know a lot of folks out there, you might have a question in your mind and you're thinking, well, maybe this is a dumb question. I don't know if I should ask this. Well, ask away. We want your questions, and the idea of the gift card is to help, kind of shake some of those questions loose. We'll be contacting the prize winner of the best question gift card after the event, and you must still meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. And with that, I'm excited now to bring in our expert presenter. Welcome, Mr. Varun Verma, Database Solutions Architect at Nutanix. Varun, it's great to have you on.
Thanks, David. Great to be here. Hello, everyone. I'm Varun Verma, Database Solutions Architect for Nutanix. I've been with the company for over 2 years, and my role with the company is primarily helping customers modernize their database infrastructure with Nutanix and with Era, which is our database as a service offering. Some of you might have seen this Era presentation before, so this is a good refresher. Also, since we last presented on this platform, we have made a lot of enhancements with Era, offerings and functionalities. So let's dive in. So today's IT leaders struggle to manage the underlying complexities across their IT environments. This includes not only the core data center infrastructure, but remote and branch offices, your DR sites, and more. These complexities makes it difficult for the business to pursue new markets, develop advanced products and services, and tackle strategic initiatives such as digital transformation projects. Much of the challenge stems from legacy infrastructure, constructed with discrete resource silos such as storage, server, virtualization, networking, and security. This fragmented design makes it difficult and time consuming to provision new IT environments to run business critical applications. Additionally, these architectures have multiple points of failures, creating a fragile IT system that is susceptible to unplanned downtime. Managing this IT complexity demands significant process overheads for executing even basic tasks like adding additional capacity or upgrading your softwares, adding unwanted friction to IT operations, and overall slowing the business. Legacy architectures also impose a lot of financial burdens, if you see, with large upfront capital purchases required for even small scale deployments. This undeniable complexity has profound impact on already stretched IT teams. It requires the tight coordination of multiple IT specialists to handle simple operations and, most importantly, leaves little time for true innovation. According to the ID research, if you see, between 45% and 60% of total storage capacity is dedicated to accommodating copy data. And out of that, 82% of the majority organizations have at least 10 copies of their production data. Okay, moving on. Now, most of the folks are coming from the database background, the DBAs and all. So as a DBA, one of the pain points I would say is around provisioning. And especially this particular slide talks about an example of an Oracle RAC database provisioning, which is a complex deployment, right? And if you see, provisioning has always been an intricate process, especially for complex deployments like Oracle RAC or SQL Server AAG. Just taking an example of Oracle RAC here, if you see, Oracle RAC has its own unique requirements from storage and networking standpoint. Multiple teams are involved just to get the database server ready. You need networking team, storage, compute, DBAs, data protection, all in all to make this happen. And sometimes it takes weeks, if not months, just to get the database server ready. And then as DBA, they would spend a couple of days to make sure the database software is deployed correctly. Backup jobs are in place, maintenance and monitoring jobs are running, and so on. So if you see, if I'm a requester or application or business requester for this database, Oracle RAC, it takes weeks or even months sometimes before actually I get the database and I can start using it. So that increases my time to market. With Era, we simplify this process with one single workflow, which includes creating everything from the infrastructure side, like creating virtual machine, carving out storage, perform network configuration, deploy Oracle softwares, including Grid and Oracle Home, and also create a backup management schedule. Era, which is our database as a service offering, automates entire provisioning process, completing an Oracle RAC complex deployment, which usually takes weeks in under 1 hour. And I'm talking about end-to-end build from infrastructure to database layer with all the Oracle best practices in place. Now, before we dive into the actual Era, what it does and what we offer, it's important to understand the underlying technology, right? So, Era is a service which is running on top of Nutanix. So, folks who are new to Nutanix, we are hyperconverged infrastructure, HCI. We converge storage and compute together. Though now our HCI abbreviation is expanding, we are now hybrid cloud infrastructure. So what we are trying to show in this slide is, what a scalable architect for Oracle or for database engine will look like, right? If you notice in this slide, we are running x86 servers with direct attached storage and compute. So that's what we do. We convert storage and compute together, right? In terms of storage, it can be your SSDs, all flash, NVMEs. And then you have compute, which includes your CPUs and memory. So each of the x86 server in a cluster has its own dedicated storage and compute. On top of this x86 server, we are running industry standard hypervisor, which can be VMware ESXi, or it can be our own hypervisor, which is called EHV. And on top of it, we run CVM. This is actually a controller virtual machine. So we have virtualized this controller within the platform itself. Okay. The CVM is actually responsible for your actual user IOs as well as running Nutanix softwares. And if you notice, all these CVMs here are clustered together. The reason we do it to form what we call as a distributed storage fabric. Now that to a hypervisor appears to be a large storage pool. Okay. But from the platform side, you're getting high availability, you're getting resiliency, linear scalability, which all are very important for any database infrastructure. Okay, moving on. Now, if you see an iceberg, what do we see? I mean, we see 10%, which we actually see, but the 90% of it's under the water. The same can be said about our IT infrastructure. And right now we are talking about database. So that's what is. All these operational areas need to be considered when we offer a new database engine as a service. And if are any updates to a database engine, we may need to change how we cater for this. Every database engine has different mechanism for each of these operations. So how much effort and time would it take to offer a new database service? Much like the iceberg, all these operational processes still exist behind the scenes. But the Nutanix database as a service solution era takes care of all these aspects through a simple and intuitive console with a uniform experience for all engines, automating the entire process, significantly speeding up the time it takes to provide new database services, while avoiding human errors and lowering risk. As we support new features or new database engines, these are immediately available for you to consume. Now, in terms of Era is a service, as I said before, which sits on top of the Nutanix infrastructure, right? It's a small virtual machine. In order to install Era, it takes like 15-20 minutes. You can get started with Era. But in terms of services, what we offer within Era is, the top 4 services is what you see on the slide. The first one is, where you start your databases, right? You have to provision something. So we offer one-click provisioning. So with Era, you can actually provision a single instance or a rack deployment or HA deployment, like Postgres HA or SQL Server AAG in matter of minutes. You can also standardize the way you provision stuff with Era. Other feature other services which we offer is around copy data management. Now, if you ask a DBA where do they spend most of their time, it would be around refreshing a database or creating clones. That takes a lot of time. And when we talk about terabyte sized databases, it's not very fast to actually create a clone. But with Era CDM functionality, you can clone an environment in matter of minutes, even if it is a 5, 10, 20 terabyte database. Same goes for your database refreshes. You can do that in a matter of minutes with just few clicks around. And we will cover this when we get into the demo. I want to show you how the tool actually works. Okay. Moving on, we also offer database protections. So say if you are about to run a large batch job, with a lot of inserts and updates, and then you want to quickly take a backup. So if I talk about Oracle DBAs, they will quickly take a, data pump backup or RMN backup, or so same goes for your SQL Server customers. They will quickly take an export of the data size, right? In our case, you can just with a single click, you can create a database snapshot. And If something goes wrong, you can go back to that snapshot. The process of taking this database snapshot takes matter of seconds. It's basically 1 to 2 minutes. That is what we advertise. So in under 2 minutes, you'll have your database, snapshot ready for you. And this particular snapshot is application consistent snapshot. So we use RMN APIs in case of Oracle. We basically QS the database before we take a snapshot. Okay. Moving on, we also offer patching. Now, that's one of the major pain points for most DBAs. It is something we have to do, every 3 to 6 months, just to be in compliance with that particular database engines, right? And in most cases, you're still doing like manually, or you do have your own in-house script, which is still, it's time-taking process when we talk about patching hundreds of database every quarter or every 6 months, right? With Era, you can automate this entire patching process. You can create a patching profile, and I'm going to show that once we get into the demo. And you can just roll it out to all the databases which are being managed through Era. Okay. So moving on. So what do we offer in terms of provisioning? So when we talk about provisioning, we do everything from creating a virtual machine to actually creating a backup management plane, and doing everything in between, right? What do we offer? So in terms of database engines, we are currently supporting 6 different database engines. We do Oracle, both the single instance and HA, like Oracle RAC. Same goes for SQL Server. We do both the single instance and always on. And same goes for Postgres. But we also offer database engines like MariaDB, MySQL. We also do SAP HANA. And we are coming up with a couple of more database engines. So with in terms of provisioning, how our provisioning works, you actually create your own software profile, which will include your OS, the OS you want, the version of Oracle or version of database engine you want, the path set you want on that profile. And then that becomes your software profile within Era, a template basically. And then you can create or start consuming that template within Era to provision multiple databases. Okay. Moving on. Other important aspect within Era or a construct within Era is Time Machine. Now, Time Machine is basically your database backup management plane. So this is the place where you will take the snapshot or will manage the snapshots. Every database which is managed within Era has a time machine running. So this time machine will include your snapshots, and these snapshots are taken based on your SLA. So you create a service level agreement for every database. You can create multiple SLAs, right? One for dev database, one for production. And those SLAs actually talks about what is your RP and RTO. So maybe if I have a production database, mission critical, I want to retain data for 30 days. So I can create that SLA, and the time machine will, based on this production SLA, will create the snapshot, will retain the snapshot with including all the logs it requires. This is also the place where you do all the copy data management functionalities. Things like creating a new clone environment, things like refreshing a database. All those things are done through Time Machine. The bugs doesn't stop here. If you have to restore a database to a certain point, that is done through Time Machine. And again, we will see this in action once we get into demo. Okay. Moving on, we offer one-click cloning and refreshes. So if I have to create a non-production environment out of my production, I can quickly do that through Era. And it takes less than 30 to 35 minutes to actually create it, even if it is on a brand new, net new virtual machine. Era does it for you with just few clicks. And if you have to refresh a database, say you already have a clone environment or a non-production environment, and you need to periodically refresh it, you can create a schedule within Era. And that can, based on the schedule, will kick off the refresh automatically. And if there's an ad hoc request to refresh a database from your production, you can just go to that particular database which you need to refresh, click the refresh button, and the database will be refreshed to the point you choose, right? So that is offered through the copy data management. Other thing what we offer is one-click database backup. Now this is not a block by block backup, it is a snapshot of a database. But these snapshots are application consistent snapshot. So whenever you take a snapshot through Era, Era is going to QS the database, take a snapshot, and then unQS the database. All this process happens in seconds, and you have a database backup ready for you, which you can do to restore or fall back or fail over to a certain point. Okay. Moving on, as I said before, one of the major pain points is around patching, and we do offer one-click patching within Era. And this is not just there for Oracle; it is true for Postgres and MySQL as well. So you can create different patch profiles within Era, and then you can automate this entire patching process. So if I talk about Oracle, in Oracle you have to do a grid level patching. If you have the HA Oracle deployment, you have to do the Oracle home patching. And sometimes, you want to just do the grid patching. You don't want to do Oracle home patching. So those different profiles can be created within Era, and that can be then rolled it to other database engines, which is being managed within Era. That can be done. And same goes for SQL Server as well. Uh, the overall concept to patch is similar to Oracle within Era, but the actual process is different because it's Microsoft has their own way of patching. SQL Server, Oracle manages it in a different way, but conceptually within Era it's going to be same. You create a software profile, and then you create different versions of it, and then you consume or patch your databases using that template image within Era. Okay. Other thing within Era is any new functionality which comes within Era always is going to be API first. So our whole architect within Era is API first. You can do pretty much all the operations within Era through an API calls. It doesn't have to be for some customers, my customers, some of the customers, they don't like UIs, right? They don't like the GUIs. So for them, this API really works. I mean, they have the actual operation code, they can execute it the way they want. Other important feature is integrating. Maybe you want to integrate Era with a third party tool, maybe like ServiceNow, something like that. You want to automate that stuff, that can be done. So the APIs are already exposed to the user for different operations when you get to use Era. Last but not the least, we do offer RBAC, role-based access control within Era. So you can create different users, you can create different roles. So one of the use case would be like, I'm a DBA, I have a couple of application teams, and they have this request of refreshing a database every week. So rather than me doing it every time, what I do is I create a role for them, maybe like application role, and give them access only to those databases which they own. And these application developers can then log into Era and refresh the database as and when they need it. So that's a self-service kind of thing which can be done. Other use case would be like you want certain DBAs just to provision, certain DBAs just to do the patching parts. All those things can be controlled with the role-based access control. With that, I'm going to switch to the demo, and then we can have a Q&A. Okay. I hope you guys can see my screen. I'm actually showing you how the Era looks like. So when you log into Era, this is what you see. So right now we are supporting 6 different database engines. We are doing Oracle, SQL Server, SAP HANA, open source databases like Postgres, MariaDB, and MySQL. Okay. So once you log into Era, this is the dashboard you see. So we try to make the dashboard less cluttered, and the simplification is there. you know if I have to navigate within this dashboard, it's easier. Say I just log in and I'm a DBA, right? And I have to see, oh, what's going on? There's a critical alert. Let me just click on this critical thing, and I get to see what's going on. I can quickly, acknowledge it, resolve it. All those things are there in the dashboard itself. Um, the navigation itself, you can see, anything in terms of how many databases I have, how many clones I have. My inventory is actually on the left side. I can just click on this particular button. I can go and check my databases. If I have to see how many clones I have, I just click here. I see number of clones I have. So the point here is the navigation itself is pretty simple. Any operations you have to do is done through this drop down menu. Okay, so this includes everything like databases, time machine, profiles, and we'll cover that. Okay. Other thing is, like, if I have to check any status of a running operation, so say if I'm doing a batch and I want to check if the batch was succeeded, I just can simply click on operations and see what's going on there. Okay. So first thing what I'm going to cover in this demo is the database provisioning aspect. So I'm going to take an example of a SQL Server here. Okay. So let's take an example where I want to create a 3-node always on with 2 nodes on-prem, and the third node will be sitting in public cloud. Okay, you can do that with an Era. So we have public cloud presence with an Era. So first thing what we do is we click on provision, we select the database engine. So I'm doing always on. So I select that. Then I give a database, basic the cluster name. So let's call it as AHG demo 01. And then I can pick and choose where I want to reside this. So I want to put this particular cluster in my production production Nutanix cluster. And I want to put one set of it in my DR side and maybe one in the AWS US West. Okay, I select the clusters where I want to reside this Windows cluster, and I click on next. Okay, I'm selecting network profile, Windows domain profile. I'm clicking on next. Next, I'm going to select the version of the SQL Server. So say I have to install 2019 version, I select that. Then I select the compute profile. So if you remember, I said, like, we are not just installing the software, we are actually doing everything from the infrastructure standpoint as well. So for that, we have created different profiles. If you see the previous section, we selected a network profile. So this is the place where you will have certain VLANs between both the on-prem cluster and AWS clusters, right? And then you have Windows domain profile, right? Then you have a software profile, which consists of your actual SQL Server version. And then you have a compute profile, which actually talks about how many vCPUs do you want to give, how many cores per CPU and memory you want to give to this particular Windows cluster. Okay. Then I'm going to input my admin password. I can probably add one more node here. So maybe I can add this to a on-prem prod cluster, and then the second will go into my DR, and the third database server VM will be residing in this AWS US West prod. Okay. Next, I'm going to select the database parameter profile. This basically talks about your memory parameters, which the SQL Server requires. Okay. I'm going to click on next. I do have option where I can pick and choose the always on availability group name. I'm going to stick to the default. And if you see over here, it's going to create 3 different virtual machines, 01, 2, and 3. And these are residing on 3 different Nutanix, physically, geographically located, separated clusters, Nutanix clusters, right? Then I'm selecting a backup preference. So, what should be my backup preference? Do I want primary only? Do I want secondary only? Or any database server, let Era choose it, or secondary when available? You can pick and choose. And then you can also pick and choose your auto failover where it should be. So if I say my auto failover would be on this cluster, on DR side, or do you want this to be going into the AWS, you can pick and choose. You can pick and choose your availability mode as well. So do you want this to be a sync commit or async commit? What should be the readable? It should be yes, no, read intent. You can select those different options. Okay. I'm going to click on next, and then this will ask for a database name. So let's call it as prod1. I can give a size. So say this is a large database, 5 terabytes. So I select the size here. Then I give a database parameter profile. Then I also have something called pre and post commands. Now this is the place where you can run your own custom scripts. Any customization you want to do at the OS level, any customization you want to do at the database layer, or you want to create some users on the database, you can do that through this pre and post hooks. Okay. And there is no limit to what you can run. If, for example, this is Windows cluster SQL Server provisioning, right? So I can run PowerShell scripts. Maybe you are doing some kind of Oracle deployment, and you want to run some kind of shell scripting or Pythons. All those different scripting can be done within this pre and post commands. Okay. I'm going to click in next. And then as a part of every deployment, Era is going to create a time machine. So this is a place where your snapshots will be stored, your logs will be stored, based on the schedule which you define and the SLA which you define. So in this case, I have multiple SLAs created. So if I click on prod, what it means is I have a continuous recoverability of 14 days. To a user, what it means is I can actually go back 14 days and still recover my database down to seconds. And I'm going to do the demo as well for this particular use case. Okay. In this case, because I'm going into two different on-prem and cloud, so I'm going to use a prod multi SLA, and then I'm going to select the schedule, what day and time I want to create the snapshot. So say every day at 4 a.m. I want to have a snapshot created. How many snapshots you want to do? Let's say 2 snapshots a day. Okay. And then the log catch-up. So this is the place where Era is going to collect the transaction logs in case of SQL Server, archive logs in case of Oracle, and log in case of your Postgres and other database engines. Okay. Next, I'm going to click here. This is for the manageability. If you want to, create some cost centers, projects, departments, you can include those tags. You also get what we call as an API equivalent button. So this is what what I meant was, Era is API first. So whenever you're doing any operations within Era, you actually get you see a payload here, the JSON payload, and also you see a curl command, or if you are a Python user, you get a Python script here for this particular operation, which you can use it to integrate through any third-party tools, or even just use this to provision rather than coming to the UI. It's more of a user choice, and we have different code base. You can do curl, Python, Golang, Java, PowerShell. Okay, I'm going to click on close here. And by the way, this API equivalent button is available for all the operations within Era. Okay. And now I'm going to click on provision, and it will kick off provisioning. So usually this provisioning process should be completed within 40 to 45 minutes. And you can see what's going on. So first, Era is going to do some kind of pre-processing. It's going to run some validation checks. Okay. Mostly around checking if you have enough resources, storage, and all those things. And then it's going to start creating virtual machines. So in this case, we are creating 3 different database servers. So it's going to create 3 virtual machines on 3 different sites we choose. And then it's going to install the Windows failover cluster, and then it's going to do other things within the AAG process. Okay. Again, the entire process should be completed in 40 to 45 minutes. So Moving on, again, if you are an Oracle user or you're an Oracle DBA, the same process or concept applies to Oracle as well. So if I have to do an Oracle rack deployment, I can go back to provisioning, database, click on provisioning, go to Oracle, click on single or rack, and same thing. I just give a cluster name. So let's call it as broad cluster. I'm going to quickly run this. The whole idea is same. So I'm going to select the cluster. I'm going to select the profile, how many nodes I want. So say I need a 4-node rack. What should be my VM prefix? So let's call it as DB or broad. So it's going to create 4 different virtual machines. I can select which software profile. Same we did for SQL Server. Then you pick a compute profile, and then you pick a system password. Then you click on next. These are the 4 VMs it's going to create. For rack, you need a scan name, so it's going to ask you to name a scan. So let's call it as prod scan. You can pick and choose your lesson port number. So let's do 1590. I'm going to click on next. Next is going to ask for a database name. So let's call it as prod2. So this becomes my SID here. And then I give a system password, select a size. Let's say this is another 5 terabyte database. So I can have data files for 5 terabytes and maybe 2.5 terabyte for FRA. I can select that. I'm going to select database parameter profile, character set, if you need to change that, and same pre and post commands. Click on next. This time machine gets created based on the SLA. Okay, same thing as we did for SQL Server. I'm going to click on next. Same API equivalent button here, and then click on provision. So this 4-node rack should be completed in 40 to 45 minutes. Okay, and you can compare this. I mean, if you're a DBA, if you've been provisioning Oracle or SQL Server HA deployments, you know how much time it takes. Just to get the database server ready, it takes a lot of time, right? So let's move on to other use cases, which is around time machine. So now I'll stick to Oracle as the use case here. So say I have this database at CMDB standby, and I want to maybe create a clone environment out of this. Okay, so how do I do it? So if you see this time machine, it gives you a calendar view. So anything which is in green, this is my basically time machine telling me this is a continuous recoverability for this particular database. I can go back to this date and still recover the database down to seconds. So point in time restores can be done. You also have a daily snapshot, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and manual if you have to take a manual snapshot. Okay. So if I have to clone this environment, all I have to do is go to actions, create single instance database clone, and say my requirement is to clone this environment from a backup which was taken on May 28th at 8:30. Okay, so I can pick and choose the time. I can actually go down to a second if I have to. If there's a specific requirement at 8:30 at 13th second, you can pick that time. You click on next. You have an option to actually create this clone on an existing environment or maybe on a new environment. So new virtual machine or existing virtual machine. Okay. So in this case, if I want to do it on a new virtual machine, I'm just going to give a virtual machine name. Just going to call it clone DB01. I'm going to give a complete profile, the network profile, click on next, give a database SID name, let's call it clone1, system password. Then select the database parameter profile. And I also have an option where I can create a schedule for data refresh. So say this database requires to be refreshed every 7 days or every 15 days. So say every 15 days you want to refresh this database from your production or from your source database, right? You can create that schedule. And you can pick a day and time as well. So every 15th day, based on my Eastern time zone, at 5 a.m., this clone one will be refreshed from my HCM source database automatically. Okay. And then same thing, you have different tags, you have different API clone buttons, and then you click on clone. So this clone process should be completed in under 30 minutes. Usually, if you compare this with the way you have been doing it with ARM and duplicate or export data pump and all those different native tools, it might, take you a couple of hours easily. Okay. Moving on, let's take an example of maybe restoring a database. So say you have a prod database, CRM. This is around 2.3 terabyte database. Let's see this. So it's 2.3 terabyte total database size. I'm going to go back to the time machine. So say I have a requirement and maybe, somebody accidentally dropped a schema in this Oracle database. And I have to quickly restore this. This is a mission critical database which needs to be restored in a few minutes, right? What I can do with Era is, and say I have a requirement where this particular table was dropped at, say, based on this current time, it was dropped at say 12:42. Okay, something like that, right? So if I have to restore to that point, how do I do it? So I go to actions, I click on restore source database. This is Era telling me that you have all the logs until this time, 1 p.m., right? And then between 1 p.m. and 1:42, Era doesn't have logs. The reason Era doesn't have logs is because I have given this particular database an SLA, which is a prod SLA, which includes creating log level snapshots every 1 hour. So if I click on show log catch-up, so every hour I'm taking a log backup, right? You can reduce it to 15 minutes if you want. So in my case, every hour it's taking a log backup along with daily full backup, right? So in this case, if I have to create this, restore this database, I need all these logs as well, right? So at this moment, I'm going to click on next, and Era is going to do an ad hoc log catch-up. This process usually takes 30 seconds, so let's wait for it. So basically at this point, what Era is doing is it's trying to do a log catch-up. It's going back to the CRM database. It's going to collect all the logs since last log catch-up was done, which was at 1 p.m. Eastern. And then it's going to update the time machine. So once this process is complete, you will see everything is in green, which means all the logs are there. Now you can restore it. Okay. Okay, so now we have everything we need. Now I can pick in day and time. So say it was 12:42 at 58 second. This is weird. This is the point in time I want to restore my prod database to. I select that time, I click on restore, I input the database name and select restore. This 2.3 terabyte database will be restored in next 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, that's one of the use case within Era. So moving on, let's talk about patching and sticking to Oracle as a use case here. So how the patching works within Era, right? So if I just step back a bit, you see over here we have different profiles created. We have a Windows domain profile, which is mostly used for your AAG deployments. We have database parameter profile where you can create the instance level parameter, which database instance uses, right? So if I click on Postgres, you'll see max replication slots, wall senders, and all those different parameters. If I say Oracle, you will see memory target, SGS, PGS, undos, and all those things. And same goes for MySQL, same goes for SQL Server. So all these different parameters. And this is something which you can customize. So I can just, if I have to create a new parameter profile, I click on create, I select that database engine, select the version. What do I want this to be, instance level or database level? I select that, click on next, and I can pick and choose how do I want to create this parameter profile. Pretty straightforward. Okay. Next is your networking. This is basically includes your VLANs, which the database virtual machine will be using. That VLAN should be residing on the Nutanix cluster and should have enough IPs to cater new builds. Okay. Next is compute, which basically talks about your CPUs and your memory, which is required for the database virtual machine. And then we have software profile, which is actually your versions of the database software. Out of box, when you install Era, you will see MariaDB, MySQL, and Postgres OOBs. This is out of box profiles created for you. But if you are an Oracle user, or say if you are a SQL Server user, you have to bring your own specific version profile with Era. Okay. So that's how the entire story works. So if I'm doing a patching, if I have a patching use case, and say I created an Oracle profile to 12.2 profile with July 2017 CPU. Okay. And using this particular base image, I created 5 different databases, right? And then time went on, and now I just installed a January 2019 CPU or PU, whatever you want to call it. And now I want all these 5 databases. This should be patched with the latest January 2019 PU. So without Era, you will run opatch auto. If you have hundreds of databases, it's a lot of manual effort. You can still create some scripts, but still it's a lot of effort, right? In case of Era, what I can do is I can just go back to these particular databases. I can select this. Let me just go back here. I think its patching is already running. Let's go back to profile, and let's click on this one. So over here, if you see, this is my database dev1, and this is currently running on July 2017 CPU, right? So this Era is telling me, like, there is a recommended version, and this is actually a home page for the database. And you get all the good informations, things like, what's your server name, what's the status, IP address, connection strings. If there is any tags, you can see that. Time zones, how many databases you have in this virtual machine, what is the version, all those good information you need. Now, if on this particular tile, this actually talks about your software profile version. Okay. And if you see over here, it's saying, there is a recommended version, which is the latest one, which is January 2019. And status says update required. So now if I have to patch this, all I have to do is click on update. I can pick and choose. If I have multiple patches applied to the base image, I'll have that option. In my case, I have 2. My use case is to apply 2019 PU, right? So I'm going to select that particular patch version. And then I get an option where I can patch this now, or pick a day and time and schedule this patching. So say I want to schedule this Saturday at, say, at 6 a.m. At 6 a.m. patch my dev1 database. I can create that schedule. Okay. But if I have to do it now, I select now. I input the server name, the database server name. Okay. And click on update. And now the patching will kick in. And in next 10 to 15 minutes, you'll have this CRM database patched. And if you have multiple database running on the same virtual machine, all of them will be patched as well, if that is the use case you have. Okay. I'm going to stop here. If there is any questions, you can post that in the chat, or if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Thank you.
Really cool demo there, Varun. Thank you so much for taking time to do that live demo. It was cool to see Nutanix Era in action. I love the user interface, and I'm sure the audience did as well. We do have a lot of great questions for you coming in from the audience. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up this poll question I want to call everyone's attention to on the screen that says, what additional information would you like about the Nutanix solution? So we encourage your response there to that poll. All right, Varun, let's see. A lot of great questions coming in. The first one I wanted to ask you here, they're asking about licensing when it comes to, I'm thinking they're referring to the Oracle licensing. They're asking how the licensing works with this solution. What's the model there?
So that has nothing to do with licensing, vendor licensing. Actually, if you talk about Oracle, you still have to have the same number of licenses. Era is the service which is running on top of the platform, right? So underneath, you still have to have those many cores which you're licensed to. So that doesn't change with Era. We are not doing anything in terms of Oracle licensing or any database vendor licensing.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Let's see, next question they're asking is about integrations. Specifically, are there capabilities or APIs available with this solution to integrate it into, say, a CI/CD pipeline?
Definitely. And that's one of our main goal in exposing the APIs. So when I was doing the demo, I was trying to show you that API equivalent button. So that is actually exposed to the user for any third party integration, whether this is a CI/CD pipeline, whether it's like, a tool like, Chef, Puppet, ServiceNow, you want to integrate, that can be done. That's the whole goal of having Era as an API first.
Nice. Very nice. I like that. Let's see. Next question they're asking is about the catalog. Is there a catalog of databases that are supported with Nutanix Era? I'm guessing that's what they're referring to, but you know better than I.
So in terms of database certification or supportability, we currently support 6 database engines: Oracle, SQL Server, Postgres, SAP HANA, MariaDB. If there is any specific to cataloging, you can try to detail that question. Otherwise, if this is just a number of the database engine, yes, we do support all these 6 database engines, and we keep on adding new database engines. Like, we are going to, at some point, we will have Mongo databases coming pretty soon within Era. So yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Exciting to hear about this solution as you all continue to enhance it. So much capability built into one solution. Let's see. Next question they're asking about application support. Can we use customized applications with this solution? I would think the answer to that is just, any application that supports these databases is still going to be compatible with the database once it's moved into Nutanix Era. Is that right?
Absolutely, David. So think of Era as a database management tool. So on top of it, you are connecting that to any application. If that application requires Oracle, SQL Server, Postgres, or any other database engine, that is supported. Nothing changes from that. It is mostly to give you this orchestration tool where you can manage all these mundane activities within the database infrastructure. Most of it is still manual. If you ask a DB, they spend a lot of time. So we are trying to help DBAs to lessen their burden for especially these monotonous tasks like provisioning, refreshing, and all those things. So that's what we do with Era. But application
Absolutely.
support doesn't change.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of DBAs would really appreciate, lessening their burden with so much burden around common tasks. So this can help take that load off. Let's see. There's a question from Michael who's asking about when it comes to potential ransomware challenges that companies are facing out there. Is there a way to keep database copies as immutable or protect them from change?
So absolutely. So in natively we do not have anything to create a sanitized copy or mask some data. We are coming up with such kind of enhancements, but in most cases what happens is you sanitize your copy or you mask your data with using native tools. Like if you're an Oracle customer, Oracle database, you might be using some kind of encryption which Oracle provides, or you write your own script to mask certain columns or certain tables you want to within the database engine, right? Those masking script, those sanitizing or sanitization of the database copies can be done as a part of your cloning process or refreshing process. So if you recall, we had this pre and post hooks. So if anything that needs to be masked and you have your own custom script, you can run that. Before you actually get the copy of this particular database, everything will be masked the way you want it to be. So user will only see certain tables the way you want them to see. That can be done. It's not a turnkey solution from error, but at some point we will have it. But right now all these can be customized the way you want it through some kind of API, some kind of like homegrown scripts.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you. Great
Yeah.
question.
Excellent. And then there's another question here about at what point does this make sense for companies with kind of smaller databases? Does this only make sense for large enterprises, or could this be a great solution as well for companies who maybe have some smaller databases?
So it's interesting, when you talk to customers who have say like 10, 15, 20 databases, small footprint in terms of database. But it's also interesting to know these smaller organizations have fewer DBAs, or maybe just one IT guy who's managing everything from virtual machine to storage to database, right? For
Right.
them this is a great tool. So that one person can now do everything in an automatic way, in an automatic fashion, and it will lessen his burden, and everything will be done the way he would like to, with all the best practices in place. He doesn't have to worry about it. Otherwise this one single guy is managing very few database, but still he's managing. He's the only person who is responsible for doing everything. So this can be a great tool for them. I mean, we do not cap on the number of, or the small, medium, large in terms of databases. I mean, it's different use cases, to be honest with you. Not every customer has all the use cases. Maybe I'm a customer who just wants to use Era for creating clones or refreshing database. I have that as a use case. I don't have to, maybe I don't even create any databases. Once in a year, I do that. So I don't want provisioning process, but I just want to use the copy management kind of stuff within Era. I can do that with Era. So different customers, small, medium, or large, has different use cases that can be catered through Era.
Excellent. I like that. And I know we're running out of time here in our live event. Maybe one just final question. If folks want to get started with Era, what's the best next step? What do you recommend, Varun?
So everyone who is interested in Era, it's very easy to kick tires. You can go to Nutanix test drive. Um, you have Era already installed there. You can play with the how the Era looks like. It has certain database engines which we have within the test drive. You don't have to do any installation. You just have to log in. You have to just create a credential within the test drive, and you can start to play around with Era. See how it looks. Right. It's very important before you buy something. You have to like know what it can do for you. Right. So that's a good way to start. But apart from that, we do all these different boot camps. This is a 1 hour webinar which we are basically telling you about Era at a very 10,000 level overview. But we do run some boot camps where users gets hands-on with the tool itself, and we do boot camps for different database engines like Oracle, SQL Server, all these different things. So you can enroll that, keep an eye on it. We do it like pretty much every month, and these boot camps are like a half day or full day. that can help you. And we also provide technical white papers if you need that. It's available. Okay.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Varun, for your excellent presentation and live demo today. Of course, thank you to the Nutanix team for supporting the event and answering so many of the excellent questions who have come in that have come in throughout the webinar. I want to remind everyone to respond there to the poll that's on the screen before you go. We do appreciate your feedback. And then finally, I want to announce the winner of our Visa $300 gift card. This is going out to Leslie Janice from Tennessee. Congratulations, Leslie Janice or Janice from Tennessee. We'll reach out to you to deliver your gift card, and we'll also be reaching out to our best question prize winner as well. Before you go, don't forget about the handouts tab. It's there that you'll find a link, as Varun talked about, to the Nutanix Era test drive where you can try out Nutanix Era for yourself for free, see it in action, get some hands-on experience. I encourage you to check that out. There's also links there to the RBL Bank case study, how they adopted Nutanix Era, the ESG technical validation for Nutanix Era, and the Forrester report there where Nutanix Era would help to net a 3-year 291% ROI and a sub 6-month payback period. So make sure that you check out those reports there in the handouts tab. And of course, visit Nutanix.com for more information. Thanks for joining us on the webinar today. I hope that you learned a lot and have a great day. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.